I never imagined that the day I would feel completely betrayed by my own child would arrive so suddenly. I was standing in my kitchen, the place that had always felt like the heart of my home, holding a letter that seemed to weigh 100 pounds in my hands. My son, David, had handed me an eviction notice. And the calm, almost clinical way he spoke made my chest tighten in disbelief. It was as if he were discussing the weather instead of tossing his own mother out of her home. I kept thinking about the years I had poured into him, every sacrifice, every late-night vigil when he was sick, every penny I had spent to give him a chance at life. And yet here he was, standing like a stranger in the doorway, claiming ownership over everything I had worked for, everything I had built. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the boy I had raised with the man I was staring at now. As I stared at him, I felt a wave of emotions collide: shock, heartbreak, and a raw, bitter taste of betrayal. I realized, in that moment, that trust could be weaponized, that love could be exploited in ways I had never considered. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But all that came out was a whisper, a fragile echo of the strength I thought I had. This wasn't just about a home. It was about every choice I had made, every ounce of devotion I had given, and the sudden understanding that the world I thought I knew had shifted beneath my feet. And as I took a trembling breath, I wondered how far this betrayal would go, and if I could ever find the strength to fight back. I knew, though, that I couldn't stay frozen in shock. I had to uncover the truth, no matter where it led me. I kept replaying the memories in my mind, trying to understand how things had come to this. I remembered when David was just a boy, the way he used to curl up next to me when he was scared or sick, and the nights I stayed awake, counting every heartbeat, praying for him. Every decision I had made, every dollar I had saved or spent, had been for him. When he faced his health struggles years ago, I sold our home, my car, even emptied part of my retirement, all to give him the chance to survive. I thought that love was enough, that devotion could protect him from the harshness of the world. I recalled the sleepless nights pacing the hospital corridors, the weight of medical bills pressing down on me, and how I tried to smile when David would tell me he felt better, even when the ache in my chest refused to go away. I had moved into a small apartment near his house, living in what felt like charity, convincing myself it was temporary, that it didn't matter as long as he was safe. I remembered thinking that a mother's love was limitless, that the sacrifices I made were part of the joy of raising a child. And yet, looking back now, I can see the cracks I ignored, the small moments of distance or resentment I brushed off as teenage rebellion or adult stress. I had trusted blindly, believing that my devotion would be recognized, that my sacrifices would never be questioned. I had always believed that the bond we shared would be unbreakable, that our family's love would shield me from betrayal. I also remember the quiet moments, when I would sit alone in our old home, holding a photograph of David as a child, and wonder if he understood how much I had given, how much I had lost. I had always thought that love was enough, that protecting him, nurturing him, and providing for him would be its own reward. But now, with the eviction notice in my hand, I realized that love, even when pure and unconditional, could be exploited. I had to confront the possibility that the person I had devoted my life to raising might not see me as a mother, but as a resource, as something to be used and discarded. And as the weight of that realization settled over me, I knew I had to dig deeper, to understand how devotion could be twisted into betrayal, and whether the life I had built for both of us had been built on a foundation of illusion. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a shaky breath, and resolved that I would not let this betrayal define me. I needed answers. And I needed to understand the truth about the man my son had become. The first moment I understood the depth of the betrayal hit me like ice water. David had always been a careful son. Polite. Reliable. The kind of child you think you know completely. And yet, as I held that eviction notice, I realized how little I truly knew him. The man standing in my doorway was cold. Detached. Almost proud of the control he now held over my life. I felt an ache in my chest. A mix of heartbreak and disbelief that I had raised someone capable of this. I remembered the small things that had seemed odd at the time, the way he would avoid certain topics about the house or money. The subtle excuses for why bills needed to be handled. The way he sometimes seemed distant, even ungrateful. I had brushed those moments aside, blaming myself for being overprotective or imagining tension where there was none. Now, the truth was undeniable. Those moments had been warnings I hadn't recognized. My thoughts drifted to the life I had devoted to him. The years of sacrifice. The nights I had stayed awake counting every heartbeat. Making sure he had food. Medicine. Comfort. Every penny I had saved. Every decision I had postponed for his benefit. Had been met with entitlement instead of gratitude. And now, the very thing I had built, the home I had poured myself into, was being stripped away with a calm efficiency that left me stunned. I felt anger rising, sharp and immediate, but it was mixed with a strange, hollow sorrow. This wasn't just theft of material things, it was a theft of trust. Of the years I had invested in love and care, I wondered how a boy I had held in my arms, soothed through scraped knees and broken hearts, could have become a man so capable of turning that love into a weapon against me. In that moment, I realized I had to brace myself for what might come next. This first betrayal was only the beginning. Something larger, something calculated, was beneath the surface. I could feel it, like a shadow stretching through every interaction, every favor, every smile he had ever given me. And I knew, with a quiet determination, that I would have to uncover the truth, no matter how painful or complicated it might be. As I sat alone that evening, the eviction notice crumpled in my hands. I started piecing things together in my mind. The signs had always been there, small and easy to dismiss. But now they took on a new, chilling clarity. Every odd excuse about bills. Every time David had insisted he needed help just for a little while. Every subtle avoidance about receipts or medical claims, I began to see a pattern. This wasn't just about a moment of selfishness. Something bigger was at play. I remembered the months when David had pretended to struggle financially, asking for help with bills that never seemed to get smaller, with medical appointments that seemed endless. I had visited him at the hospital, watched him lie in bed, pale and weak, trusting every word, every sigh, every hint of suffering. And now I wondered if all of it had been a performance, carefully staged to make me feel necessary, to make me feel responsible. The thought made my stomach twist. Could someone I loved so completely manipulate me so thoroughly? The idea was terrifying. But I knew I couldn't ignore it. I started retracing every payment I had made, every check I had written, every time I had emptied my account or sold something valuable for his sake. Each record I looked at brought the same hollow question: had my devotion been funding a lie? I could feel my anger rising. But it was tempered by a deep, aching sorrow. I had always believed that love protected us, that family meant honesty, that what we give out of care is sacred. And now, I began to see how those very instincts could be twisted, how trust could be weaponized by someone clever enough to hide the truth in plain sight. I realized then that uncovering the truth would not be easy. There was more than one layer here, more than one deception to unravel. I needed help, someone who could see the evidence clearly, without emotion clouding judgment. The thought of involving a lawyer, someone I trusted, brought a mixture of relief and anxiety. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely determined. And then a chilling possibility settled in my mind. If David had been this calculating with me, what else had he been hiding? How many people had he deceived along the way? Using charm, manipulation, and my own love against me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I was facing wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was the opening of a door into a carefully constructed web. One that I had been unknowingly supporting for months, perhaps even years. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the realization sink in. This was no longer about an eviction or a stolen home. This was about understanding the full scope of deception, about gathering evidence, about learning how someone could exploit love so completely. And as I sat there in the dim light of my kitchen, I resolved to follow the trail wherever it led. No matter how painful, no matter how far it would take me, the next steps would define whether I remained a victim or found a way to reclaim my life. The next morning, I felt a mixture of dread and determination as I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by checkbooks, bank statements, and receipts. Each piece of paper was a fragment of the story I needed to understand, a trail that might reveal whether David's betrayal went deeper than I dared imagine. I traced every payment I had made, every late-night transfer, every emergency loan I had given him. Patterns began to emerge. Small, but consistent. Months when bills didn't add up. Purchases that didn't fit his supposed struggles. And expenses that seemed almost excessive for a man supposedly scraping by. I remembered the times he had called me, voice weak and tired, asking for just a little help. I had believed every word, every sigh, every pause filled with worry and illness. But now, looking at the numbers, a shadow of doubt crept in. Could those calls have been carefully scripted? Each one designed to tug at my heartstrings, to make me act without question. I hated myself for considering it. Yet I knew I couldn't ignore the possibility. I decided to reach out to someone I trusted completely, my longtime attorney, David Hartwell. He had guided me through my husband's passing, the building of my business, and the intricacies of estate planning. I needed his eyes on this. Someone who could see the patterns without being clouded by love or fear. As I recounted the events, the payments, and my growing suspicions, I felt the burden of isolation ease just slightly. There was someone in my corner, someone who understood the gravity of what might be happening. Together, we began outlining a plan. We would document everything: the transfers, the conversations, the small inconsistencies that had seemed insignificant at the time. I remembered each instance of David's charm and my own willingness to believe him. I wrote down every memory, every detail that could become evidence. My hands shook at first, not from fear, but from the weight of the truth I was uncovering. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was a carefully orchestrated deception that had manipulated my instincts, my love, and my trust. I also realized I needed to prepare emotionally. Looking at the evidence was like staring into a mirror that reflected not just David's lies, but my own vulnerability. I had to steel myself for the possibility that confronting him directly would bring more pain. But I also knew that uncovering the truth was essential, not just for my own peace of mind, but to prevent further exploitation, whether from him or anyone else who might manipulate my goodwill. That night, as I sat with the statement spread across the table, I felt a strange mix of fear and resolve. Ich received. Each payment, each small note, was a step closer to understanding the full scope of the betrayal. I thought about how love, when blind, can be used as a weapon, and how trust, when unguarded, can become a vulnerability. But most importantly, I reminded myself that I was not powerless. I had survived a lifetime of challenges, built a career from nothing, and navigated losses I never thought I could bear. I would survive this too. And in that determination, I found the first spark of hope that justice might still be possible. I closed the papers and took a deep breath. Knowing that the confrontation was coming, I had gathered the pieces, and soon I would see the whole picture. The question lingering in my mind was simple but heavy: would David recognize the truth? Or would I have to face the full extent of his deception alone? The day I finally faced David felt surreal. Walking into the apartment I had once thought of as his home, I was struck by how unfamiliar it seemed. How carefully polished and staged, it was luxury hiding deception. I reminded myself to stay calm, to let the evidence speak louder than my emotions. Every step I had taken to document payments, track accounts, and note inconsistencies had led me to this moment. As I looked around, I reflected on the years of trust I had given so freely, the countless nights I had worried, the sacrifices I had made without hesitation. I realized that all of it had been manipulated, turned into a tool that David had used to live comfortably at my expense. My heart ached. But beneath the ache, a fire of determination burned. I would not let him escape accountability. Examining the evidence, I could see the pattern of deception: clearly falsified bills, inflated medical claims, and expenses that never matched reality. I thought about the small moments that had seemed innocuous, the calls where he sounded exhausted, the sudden trips that never had real purpose, the way he avoided showing receipts. It was all deliberate, carefully orchestrated. The realization made my stomach turn. But I felt a grim sense of clarity. I reflected on the confrontation ahead, not a shouting match, but a moment of truth. I imagined explaining to him how I had followed every trail, how every act of trust had been twisted. I rehearsed the memories, the facts, and the emotions I needed to convey. I reminded myself that my goal was not revenge but understanding and justice, both for myself and for anyone else who might be vulnerable to such manipulation. Standing there, I could feel the weight of years pressing down, but also a sense of empowerment. The betrayal was deep, but I had evidence, preparation, and clarity of mind. The confrontation was no longer about fear, it was about reclaiming control, about witnessing truth and demanding recognition of it. In the silence before I spoke, I remembered the little boy David once was, the child I had nurtured with every ounce of love I had, and I mourned him briefly, knowing that the man before me was unrecognizable, shaped by greed and deception. But that sadness quickly gave way to resolve. I would not allow his manipulation to define the rest of my life. I would speak, I would act, and I would hold him accountable. And as I took a deep breath, steadying myself, I understood that this confrontation was only the beginning. The truth had to come fully to light, and the consequences would follow. The question that lingered was no longer whether I could uncover the deception, it was whether he could confront the truth of what he had done, and whether justice could finally be served. After confronting David, the relief of having the truth in hand was tempered by the long road ahead. I knew that uncovering deception was only part of the battle. Making sure justice was served required patience, persistence, and careful planning. With the evidence I had gathered, I could see a path forward, a way to reclaim not just what had been taken, but my sense of agency and dignity. I reflected on the legal steps ahead, realizing that the system could now protect me in ways my own strength alone could not. The documents, the receipts, the patterns of behavior, all of it painted a clear picture of deliberate manipulation. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and cautious hope. For the first time in months, I could imagine a life where the betrayal did not define me. But justice wasn't only about money or possessions. It was about accountability, about ensuring that someone who had spent so long exploiting trust could not continue to harm others. I thought about the quiet victories David acknowledging. Finally, the weight of what he had done, and the knowledge that he would face consequences. It was deeply personal, yet part of a larger truth: wrongdoing, no matter how carefully hidden, eventually meets light. I also reflected on my own growth through this ordeal. I had learned to recognize manipulation, to document and protect myself, and to trust my instincts, even when they conflicted with my emotions. The experience left me stronger, more cautious, but also more resilient. I realized that reclaiming my life meant more than legal restitution. It meant asserting my voice, my choices, and my boundaries. And so, as I began rebuilding my home and my life, I felt a quiet sense of empowerment. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed my own strength and determination. I knew that, moving forward, I would carry the lessons learned, not bitterness, and that I could face the future with confidence. Justice had been served in the most profound way, not just through the law, but through reclaiming my own sense of power and self-respect. As I reflected on the journey, I understood that surviving betrayal required more than patience. It required courage, clarity, and the willingness to confront painful truths, no matter how personal. And in that courage, I found a renewed sense of life, hope, and the knowledge that I could thrive beyond the pain. Sitting in my new home, a modest space that finally felt like mine, I thought about how far I had come. The pain of betrayal, the sleepless nights of worry, and the months spent uncovering the truth had left scars. But they had also shaped a resilience I hadn't realized I possessed. I reflected on the lessons learned, the importance of trusting my instincts, the necessity of boundaries, and the power of reclaiming my voice even when the world seemed against me. I thought about love and trust, and how they can be both a gift and a vulnerability. I realized that protecting oneself does not mean closing your heart. It means balancing care with caution, devotion with discernment. It was not revenge that mattered, but justice, clarity, and the ability to stand tall despite deception. I understood that my experiences could serve as guidance for others, a reminder that vigilance and self-respect are not acts of selfishness, but essential elements of healthy relationships. I also felt gratitude for the friends, the attorney, and the support network that had guided me through this ordeal. Gratitude for the strength I had discovered within myself, and gratitude for the clarity that comes when truth is faced head-on. Now, as I look ahead, I know that life continues not defined by betrayal, but by the choices I make and the boundaries I uphold. I am living fully on my own terms, and I hope that by sharing this story, I can help others recognize the signs, protect themselves, and understand that even in the deepest hurt, resilience and justice are possible. If my story resonates, I encourage you to share your experiences, to speak up, and to honor your own strength.